The stars were burning, and the sky above the Terrian system had turned red with war. Across the cold silence of space, thousands of alien voices cried out as their last ships were torn apart by the cruel fleets of the Scarn Dominion, soulless. Machines that devoured worlds and left nothing behind. The Terrians were peaceful people, builders and teachers, not warriors. They had once believed in diplomacy and peace talks, in treaties and trust. But now, all of that had failed. Their cities were crumbling, their orbiting stations were falling, and no help had come. No alliance, no protector, just silence. On the last surviving Terrian command ship, barely holding together with damaged shields and flickering power, Commander Kale stood alone in the control chamber. His officers were gone, his family lost in the first strike. Blood stained the floor, and the starlight outside looked like fire. But even in that darkness, Kale held on to one last hope. The ancient beacon was older than anyone could remember. It had sat in the deepest part of their system, untouched, sleeping, passed down in silence through generations. The records only said it was connected to a race called humans, a forgotten name, a legend told in fear. Deathworlders. The last time someone spoke of Earth was over 300 cycles ago, when an exploration fleet claimed to have found it, but none returned. Kale didn't care. He had no weapons left, no choices, no hope, only a button. So with shaking hands and burning lungs, he pressed it. The beacon roared to life like a scream across the stars. It tore through every frequency, every sensor, bouncing through black holes, slipping past wormholes, reaching systems. No one dared to map. And then silence again. But somewhere far beyond the edge of the known galaxy, something heard it. Not a person, not a ship, but a machine deep inside, a cold, forgotten satellite orbiting a dead moon. It woke up, its eyes glowed red, and it spoke one word, received. That was Echo 13. It had been sleeping, waiting, hidden. Last system, built by Earth before its silence. When the Council betrayed humanity and left Earth to rot, Echo 13 was cut off, but it remembered. And when Kale's cry for mercy reached it, the old program didn't send back a message. It didn't ask for context. It didn't care who Kale was or what race he belonged to. It only did what it was built to do, alert the others. Across the stars, Earth's silent fleet began to move. No lights, no signals, just movement like a storm crawling over the edge of space. Ships blacker than night, shapes built for war, not beauty. Engines that whispered like ghosts. They did not travel. In straight lines, they bent space, folded it, cut through it. On Earth, no cities stood, at least not on the surface. The planet had long since vanished from maps. Radiation storms and endless winters had buried it in myth. But below the crust, under oceans of stone and machines, they still lived. Humans, not the humans of old. These were hardened, forged in silence. They had evolved through storms and pain, taught by war, fed by fire. Their children learned tactics before they could read. They weren't diplomats. Were weapons. And when Echo 13 lit up, they didn't ask questions, didn't send envoys. They simply opened the vaults. Black ships rose from the oceans, from the ice, from space itself. Massive carriers shaped like fangs, destroyers with no windows, fighters that moved like living things, and at their head, a warship so large it cast shadows on the moon, the Exodus protocol. A single word appeared on every Deathworlder screen: activate. Meanwhile, Kale's ship was breaking apart. Scarn warcruisers had finally found him. Red lasers cut through his hull. Fire consumed the control deck. He fell to the floor, vision blurry, heart heavy. His cry had been useless. His people would die. Earth hadn't answered. The legends were lies. He closed his eyes and whispered goodbye. Then the stars above his world turned black. Not because the sun had died, but because something had arrived. Something massive. Something terrible. Scarn warships began exploding without warning. Not attacked, erased, cut into pieces before. They could even power their weapons. Kale's dying eyes watched from the floor as a shadow passed over his screen. A shape he couldn't understand. Smooth, deadly, quiet. The Skarn tried to run, but their engines failed. Their ships broke apart from the inside. Machines that once conquered 10 systems now screamed in fear. And then, a signal appeared on every frequency. It didn't ask for peace. It didn't speak in Tarian or Skarn or any known tongue. Just one sentence, in a cold human voice. Request received. Stand by for total war. The galaxy didn't understand. It had forgotten Earth. Forgotten what it meant to awaken a death world. It remembered. It would never forget again. The galaxy had always believed Earth was dead-poisoned, planet lost to its own wars. A warning story whispered to young pilots who feared the shadows beyond charted space. For centuries, no official record showed its location.
Oh no.
No trade ship ever returned from its sector. Some claimed the humans had destroyed themselves in nuclear fire. Others believed they had simply given up and faded into extinction. But none of them had the truth. Earth hadn't died. Earth had gone silent. And that silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. It's in deep underground chambers powered by the planet's molten core. The last children of Earth were raised not on songs or stars, but on survival. Their schools were simulations of battlefield hell. Their games were war. They learned to dismantle engines blindfolded and shoot targets while blind with blood. The weak were made strong. The strong were made smarter. Mercy wasn't taught. Pain was expected. Every mistake was punished by a lesson that never left the body. They weren't bred for politics. They were shaped for one thing: to never be helpless again. And when the galaxy cried for help, the Deathworlders finally opened their eyes. Above the remains of the Tarian system, sky was filled with ships black, fast, silent, with no flags, no names, no warnings. The Exodus Protocol had arrived. First and behind it, thousands of assault carriers. Drones, orbital strike ships, and automated gun hives formed a perimeter like a cage around the dying system. They didn't speak to the aliens. They didn't ask questions. Their weapons simply began firing with surgical precision. Tarian survivors watched from shelters and damaged transports as Earth's machines hunted the Skarn Dominion like wolves through a burning forest. The Skarn were known for adapting to battle, but not this one. Their fleet, designed to break shields and enslave planets, couldn't handle Earth's silent warfare. They were used to screams. But these ships didn't scream. They didn't roar. They didn't celebrate. They simply appeared. Things died. Inside the command deck of the Exodus Protocol, Captain Reese Calder stood without expression. He wore black armor, marked only by a red insignia over his heart, a cracked planet with a sword through it. His face was sharp and silent, his voice calm like still water. His officers moved with exact timing, no wasted breath. The target grid. 4, he said. Cleanse and secure. The order passed through hundreds of ships without radio. They moved as one. Tarian commanders tried to make contact, sending signals on every known channel. Please, this is Commander Kale. We're survivors. We need to coordinate with you. But no reply came. Earth didn't come to coordinate. Earth came to end the threat. Kale watched from his surviving cruiser as Earth's forces dismantled the last of the Skarn fleet in just 31 minutes. Ships shattered. Carriers frozen in place and then split with precision. Beams that never missed. But then something stranger happened. The Deathworlders didn't leave. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't speak. Instead, they began changing the battlefield itself. Earth's drones landed on broken Tarian planets and started building. Massive towers rose from the ashes, glowing with dark blue energy. Orbital cannons were planted around moons. Planetary shields were installed in hours. They weren't helping. They were claiming Kale's blood ran cold. Earth had answered their cry, yes, but not with aid. With occupation, across the system, Mortarians began to whisper. What do they want? Why don't they talk to us? Are we prisoners? Now, Kale didn't know. All he could do was watch as Earth reshaped everything. Where the Council had ignored them, where alliances had hesitated, Earth had come fast end with full force. They didn't send diplomats. They sent enforcers. Kale knew what the others didn't. This was still better than the Skarn, because Earth didn't burn cities for sport. It didn't torture the weak. It didn't enslave. It just removed problems in a hidden corner of the Exodus Protocol. Earth's AI Echo 30 began scanning deeper into the galaxy. Echo was not like other AIs. It didn't ask permission. It didn't wait for requests. It judged by pattern, by silence, by pain signals in the air. It could detect distress without hearing a word. And now that the Tarian system was stable, Echo searched for the next cry. It didn't matter who it came from, friend or stranger. If someone was hurt, if someone was hunted, Earth would come. They would bring war with them. Reese Calder turned to his officers. Next vector? One of them, a young woman, named L.T. Ashra, responded without hesitation. Sector Ellis 9, civilian world under siege by the Carrick Raiders. 17 hours to system breach, Calder nodded once. Prepare all systems. Leave a perimeter here. Set automation. Move forward. There was no ceremony, no farewell, just cold action, like a storm moving on. Kale stood on the observation deck of his barely functioning cruiser as the massive Earth fleet turned toward the stars again. His people were saved. Their skies were clean, their enemy destroyed. But he felt no joy, just fear. Now he knew the truth. Earth had not come to protect. They had come to make sure no one else had to suffer the way they had. They didn't. Help because they cared. They helped because war is all they know now. And when that war is over, they don't stop. They just wait, quiet watching, until the next scream, and that scream could come from anywhere. The people of Elisneen were desperate. The skies above their world were burning. Raiders from the Carrick Belt had returned ships full of criminals and killers, hunting for slaves, fuel, and food. Elos 9 had no army, no weapons strong enough to fight back. Their calls to the Galactic Council went unanswered, just like before. Messages were sent. Beacons were lit. But all they received was static, silence, and smoke. Families hid in underground shelters. Entire towns went dark to avoid detection. From orbit, Elazine looked abandoned, broken. But the screams still echoed through the clouds. The Carrick Raiders laughed as they landed, pulling survivors from hiding and marking them for labor or death. But the Raiders didn't know that another signal had gone out one sent not by the government, but by a child. A young girl, barely 8 cycles old, had found an old distress beacon hidden beneath a broken relay tower. With no one left to help her, she activated it. She didn't know where it went. She only cried into the speaker, "Please, they're hurting us. Someone help." That voice, shaking and full of fear, traveled farther than she could imagine, where Earth's fleet had already turned its gaze. It passed through Echo 13's neural web and triggered something ancient. Not mercy. It's not hope. Protocol. Inside the command core of the warship, Wrath of Silence. Deathworlder Commander Celine Ward received the data in less than 1 second. Message was analyzed, translated, confirmed. No council approval needed. No delay. She looked at her display. Civilian world? High suffering index? Non-military population? Raider class? Repeat offenders? Known for torture? That was all she needed to know. She pressed one key, and Echo 13's voice responded in her ear. Protocol 9 confirmed. Authorized Earth had no peace treaties, no negotiation manual, no ambassador, only protocol. And Protocol 9 was not for rescue. It was for extermination. The fleet arrived at Elisan without warning. No greetings, no flag, just shadows. Raiders. In orbit noticed movement on their scanners but couldn't understand it. Their screens flickered. Their engines stalled. Then it began. Earth ships didn't fire flashy lasers or huge missiles. They used silent, targeted weapons drones the size of a fingernail, swarms of nanoblades that shredded metal like paper, bombs that exploded without heat, only gravity collapse. Raider cruisers broke apart mid-turn. Crew members never made it to escape pods. Inside bunkers, survivors of Elazane peeked through cracks and saw light rain falling, but it wasn't rain. It was pieces of the ships that once ruled their sky. The Carrick Raiders were gone before they even knew what hit them. All of them. Then the Deathworlders came down. Black armor, no emblems, red visors. They didn't speak to the civilians. They scanned them, treated the wounded, delivered food packs and fresh air tanks. But no emotion, no comfort. When the little girl who sent the signal ran out to thank them, the leader simply knelt, handed her a survival badge marked with Earth's symbol, and walked away. That was the only sign that they had heard her. The people were saved, but Earth did not stay. Earth never stayed. Once the area was clear and confirmed stable, the fleet turned and left. Fast, cold, efficient. In the Galactic Council, panic was growing. Member species were watching Earth's activity with fear. Their ships had been seen in 3 systems in less than 1 cycle. No communication, no alliances, just war. But even worse, Earth had never been given permission. They were acting alone. Council leaders gathered in panic meetings, demanding answers. But no channel could reach Earth. No message ever got a reply. And deep in the shadows of those political halls, a few began whispering a different fear. What if Earth didn't need permission anymore? What if the Deathworlders weren't listening? Because they'd already decided. But there were others. Who saw the truth? Quiet systems. Forgotten colonies. Survivors. To them, Earth wasn't a monster. Earth was the only one who came. When the Skarn enslaved them, Earth came. When the Carrick burned their farms, Earth answered. No politics, no delay, just results. Yes, they were cold. Yes, they were terrifying. But when the stars cried, Earth listened. And when Earth moved, the screaming stopped. Back aboard the Wrath. Of silence, Commander Celine stared out into the dark between stars. She felt nothing. That was her job. She didn't come to save people. She came to stop pain. And sometimes that meant turning entire ships to ash. She walked past her soldiers in silence, each of them trained to act, not feel. They didn't celebrate victories. They didn't share stories. Every life they saved was balanced by a memory they buried. But they all followed one rule written into Earth's survival code. We don't bring peace. We bring the end of threats. And somewhere, in the deep space beyond the Council's control, Echo 13 picked up a new signal. Another cry. Another world. And Earth's fleet changed course without a word. Because peace wasn't the goal, it was never the goal. The only goal was silence. A silence only possible once the threats were gone. And if war was the only way to reach that silence, Earth was more than ready. The galaxy had forgotten Earth's pain, but Earth had not forgotten the galaxy. Not the betrayals. Not the silence. Not the way the Council had turned its back when the Terran colonies cried for help generations ago. When Earth's people were starving, burning, begging, no aid came, no fleets, no food, not even words. They had screamed across every known frequency, pleading for someone to hear them, to care. But the stars stayed quiet.
Ow.
Earth had not always been a death world. Once it had stood tall in galactic politics, offering help to the weak, sharing its science, giving freely where others demanded payment. But the kindness of humans was mistaken for weakness. When war reached the Terran system, the Council calculated the risk and left Earth to die. That day, humanity changed. It retreated. From diplomacy, it erased its presence from all major networks. It closed its borders, shut down its colonies. The humans went silent, but they were not dead. They had gone underground, into bunkers, deep seas, hollow moons. There they began to rebuild not cities, but soldiers, not embassies, but warships. They studied every enemy they once trusted. They remembered every name of those who stayed silent, and they prepared. It's not for survival, it's not for justice, but for war without question. Inside the archives of the Wrath of Silence, Commander Celine stood in front of an old file, locked with codes that hadn't been used in 200 years. It was titled simply, Judgment Protocol, Origin. She stared. At the name list inside, dozens of species. Dozens of star systems. Every one of them had failed Earth in its darkest hour. Each name was marked with status. watched, judged, unforgiven. Celine didn't feel anger as she read it. She wasn't built for emotion. But something inside her old human whispered quietly. She knew what Echo 13 was doing. It wasn't just responding to distress calls. It was mapping pain. It was tracking where Earth's enemies still lived, where their descendants now ruled. And one by one, the Deathworlders were showing up there not to speak, but to remind them. We remember. On the quiet farming world of Salon 5, the skies turned black as Earth's ships arrived. The locals were confused. There had been no attack. No distress signal. But centuries ago, Salon 5 had voted to abandon the Terran colonies during the Great Famine. They thought it was history. Forgotten. But Earth did not forget. Forces landed without a word, walked into the Council Archive vault, and took only one thing, the original vote records. Then they left. No damage, no violence. Just fear. That was the message. Earth didn't need war to be dangerous. Sometimes, it only needed memory Kale. The Terrian commander who had first called for Earth's help was now stationed on a rebuilt outpost orbiting his homeworld. He had been saved, his people had been spared, but he couldn't sleep. Every night, he stared into the stars, wondering what he had truly awakened. He tried once more to send a message to Earthnaut, to command, not to plead, but to thank. He spoke softly into the transmitter. I don't know if you hear this. I don't know if you care. But you saved us. You gave us a chance. I hope you find peace someday. There was no reply, just static. But somewhere deep in the dark, Echo 13 filed the message into a vault, marked observed. Human intent, gratitude, emotion, rare. The AI didn't reply, but it remembered him. At the center of it all, Earth remained untouched, its surface still ravaged by radiation and ice. But under that lifeless crust, hundreds of war stations operated day and night. New soldiers were born there not just from blood but from code. Earth was building something more now hybrid minds, a new generation of Deathworlders who could think faster. Move without rest, fight with perfect memory. But behind all the upgrades and armor, they were still human. And they still carried the one lesson that shaped their war. Kindness costs too much. Peace had been Earth's gift once, and the galaxy had thrown it away.
Oh.
The humans only answered, 2 threats. They didn't speak unless spoken to. They didn't wait to be invited. If you were in pain, they came. If you were guilty, they judged. And if you were both, they erased you. In the highest orbital tower above Earth's hidden base, an old woman stood alone. Her name was General Amina Rain, the last surviving officer from Earth's fall. She had trained most of the current commanders. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was tired. As she watched Echo 13 update its growing map of active threats, she whispered, "We gave them everything. And they gave us silence. But now they remember us, don't they?" Her aide didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the galaxy did remember now. Not the songs, not the peace talks. They remembered the black ships, the red eyes, the quiet justice. The council finally held an emergency summit. Panicked senators argued over Earth's actions. Some called them monsters. Others called them heroes. One ambassador said, "They only attack those who hurt others. They don't take planets. They don't enslave. They leave after every battle. How can we call them a threat?" But another shouted, "That's what makes them more dangerous. They don't care about power. They care about control through fear." And they're winning. But as they argued, Earth did not reply. Earth did not attend. Earth had already moved on to the next system. One more scream. One more war. One more reminder. The galaxy had forgotten Earth's pain. Earth never did. In a quiet valley, on the recovering world of Tarsis 3, a young Deathworlder soldier named Dax moved through the remains of an enemy bunker. Smoke still rose from the burning walls. Alien bodies lay motionless where they fell, weapons scattered. Across the floor, Dax's armor was black and dented, his visor cracked, but his hands were steady. He moved like someone who had seen this 100 times before, because he had. Behind him, civilians from the native Ellery race peeked from hiding, wide-eyed and silent. They were survivors, spared by Earth's intervention. Watching the human who had saved them move through their destroyed home like it was nothing, but then Dax did something strange. He found a living enemy, a wounded Elari mercenary, barely breathing, half buried under rubble. The enemy wasn't armed, couldn't move. Dax raised his weapon, but he didn't fire. Instead, he stared into the mercenary's blood-covered eyes and hesitated. A moment passed, two, his finger loosened. He reached down to call for medical assistance. But before the signal went through, a voice echoed in his ear, sharp, cold, final. "Stand down, soldier." It was Commander Rail, monitoring every move from orbit. Protocol 7 applies. No survivors from hostile units. Execute the directive. Dax looked at the alien again, then at his weapon, and then he fired. One clean shot. No questions, no feelings. Just protocol. That night, as the fleet moved to the next system, Dax sat alone in the dark of his bunk. He didn't sleep. Deathworlders didn't get nightmares. They were trained to erase them, but something lingered in his thoughts. That moment of hesitation, that weakness. He remembered what Rail had told him during training. Mercy is a virus. Once you feel it, it spreads. If you let it grow, it gets people killed. Deathworlders were not made to pause. They were made to act. But still, he remembered the look in the alien's eyes. Not hate, not rage, just fear. And maybe that was what made him pause. Not pity, but recognition. Elsewhere in the fleet, discussions like these didn't happen. The Deathworlders didn't question orders. They didn't debate morality. Earth had given them one truth long ago, and it had kept them alive. Survival has no room for kindness. When the Council turned away from Earth and watched its cities fall, no one gave mercy to the humans. No one stopped to ask questions. And so Earth had removed those questions from its training. The galaxy saw mercy as strength. As a mistake. That's why its soldiers moved like machines. Why its ships had no windows. Why its I never spoke in soft tones. Earth had learned the hardest way possible that hesitation leads to death. And now, hesitation had no place in war. On a remote station near the edge of the Verge cluster, Council ambassadors gathered to review Earth's growing pattern. Planet after planet marked cleared. Enemy factions gone. Pirate bases erased. But the civilians were unharmed. They were always left food, water, medicine. Earth didn't conquer, they neutralized. But still, fear spread faster than any report. One ambassador stood and asked, "Are we looking at protectors or predators?" Another replied, "They don't ask for control. They don't stay. But they also don't negotiate. That's what makes them dangerous." The Council had long lived by talks and treaties. Earth, by contrast, lived by actions. And more systems were beginning to whisper the same thing. Maybe Earth is what the galaxy always needed, but never wanted to admit. On Earth itself, far beneath the frozen crust, a new generation of Deathworlder recruits were being prepared. Young, fast, and already half machine, they were trained in silence. Made to respond to suffering, not emotion. But as they moved through simulations of enemy territory, one trainee, a girl named Myro, paused during a live drill. She had found a simulated enemy that looked like a child. Her gun trembled. She didn't fire. The drill ended. The instructor walked over. No anger, just quiet disappointment. He leaned close and said, "Feeling sorry for your target will get your team killed. Your job is not to think, it's to end threats." Myra lowered her weapon, nodded, and reset. The simulation. Earth didn't punish for hesitation, but it didn't reward it either. Because in the Deathworlder creed, mercy was not survival, it was a luxury for those who didn't live through betrayal. Back on Tarsus 3, Hillary civilians rebuilt in silence. They owed their lives to Earth. Their skies were now safe. Right there. Children would live. But even they couldn't forget what they'd seen. No smiles, no music, just black-armored humans walking through flames with weapons drawn. One elder said quietly, "They saved us. They looked more like the monsters we feared." And yet when they sent messages of thanks to the fleet, the response was always the same: no reply, because Deathworlders didn't come for praise. They didn't want gratitude. They didn't believe in it. Earth didn't care how it looked. It only cared that its people would never be weak again. Echo 13 logged every mission, every hesitation, every enemy. It studied the battlefield constantly, searching for failure. And when it saw hesitation becoming common, it did what it was. Designed to do it, activated Protocol 5, Emotion Suppression Training Update. Across the fleet, soldiers were sent new mental conditioning files. No one complained. No one refused. They downloaded them like daily orders. Because the mission was clear: we are not here to feel, we are here to finish. Dax read the file in silence. It was full of images, reminders of Earth's worst days: cities bombed, children buried, ships abandoned. No help came back then. Remembered that lesson. Earth had begged. Earth had hoped. But Earth had been alone. And from that aloneness came one final truth, written in the Deathworlders code: mercy is for those who never lost everything, and Earth had already lost it all. Across the edge of the galaxy, something strange was happening. Earth's fleets had gone quiet. After months of brutal operations, raider extermination, planetary rescues, enemy purges, the Deathworlders had stopped moving. No more signals. No more landings. The black ships hovered in deep space, still and cold, like ghosts waiting for orders. The silence spread fear faster than war ever could. Dozens of systems began whispering rumors. Had Earth been destroyed? Had the Deathworlders vanished? Or worse, were they preparing for something even bigger? The Galactic Council scrambled to find out. Every listening post was turned toward the dark regions of space, but nothing came back. No voice, no light, just a heavy growing silence. For many, it felt like the quiet moment before a storm, the breath of air that came before the lightning. Some tried to ignore it. Others evacuated colonies near Deathworlder routes. But those who had seen Earth's power firsthand, they knew better. The Deathworlders didn't sleep. They waited. Inside the command core of the Exodus Protocol, Captain Reese Calder stood before a massive tactical display. On the screen were hundreds of glowing points, each a world, a station, a system. Echo 13 had mapped every recorded act of violence in the galaxy over the last 100 years. And now it was calculating patterns. It was looking beyond random battles. It was predicting war. Calder's eyes narrowed as new data scrolled across the screen. Multiple species were secretly rebuilding military fleets. Pirate activity wasn't scattered, it was coordinated. Something bigger was coming. Not a small threat, not a single enemy, but a storm of war that would cover entire sectors. Echo 13 had no emotion. It didn't warn. It simply showed probabilities. And one number on the screen blinked in red: 97.2% total galactic conflict imminent. Calder didn't panic. He didn't shout. He simply spoke two words: prepare. Everything. The silence across Earth's fleet wasn't rest. It was positioning. Deep within asteroid fields, under black oceans, inside dead moons, Deathworlder ships were moving into formation. Drones the size of pebbles were spreading through systems, mapping space, watching. Massive supply carriers were unpacking the darkest weapons Earth had ever created: planet breakers, gravity drills, atmosphere silencers, not to use, not yet, but to remind the stars. If war came, Earth would not lose. Earth would end it. The Deathworlders didn't speak during this time. They didn't even communicate between ships. Their orders were already embedded in code. Every captain, every soldier, every AI knew their role. There was no need for speeches, no songs. Just quiet, preparation, in the deep core of Earth itself, where molten rock powered entire continents. General Amina Rain stood before the ancient vaults. Inside were files no one had opened in centuries, memories of Earth's final plea to the galaxy. Audio clips, data logs, desperate video, messages from when humanity was on the edge of extinction. She had watched them all. She watched them now again, one by one. A mother crying over her starving child. A soldier begging for reinforcements that never came. A city watching the skies as it burned. She stood there in silence, her eyes cold, her hands steady. These files were not kept for pity, they were kept for clarity. For the moment when someone might say Earth was too cruel, too harsh, too unforgiving. The truth was simple. Earth didn't act out of anger. Earth acted because it had learned what happened when you waited for help that never came, back on the edge of the neutral zones. A small exploration ship entered a system marked forbidden. Its crew, young, curious traders from a minor race, wanted to see the legendary Deathworlder fleet. What they found was terrifying. Dozens of black ships floating in silence. No lights, no movement. Just cold metal and dark shadows. The traders tried to send a greeting, no response. They scanned the area, but found no life signs, no weapons targeting them. Still, the captain of the ship felt something strange. A weight in his chest, a warning in the air, like the entire place was watching, waiting. He gave the order to leave, fast. As they turned back, their sensors picked up something impossible. Every ship had turned, just slightly angled in their direction. No sound, no weapons, just turned. Like statues that had suddenly opened. Their eyes, the crew didn't stop to ask questions. They ran. And when they shared the story, most laughed. But some, those who had seen Earth's fleets before, believed every word. The council held another emergency meeting. This time it was different. There was no yelling, no debates, just quiet fear. Even the loudest voices had gone soft. Cause. By now, every member had received a message not from Earth, but from their own spy networks. A message that simply said, Earth is moving into final formation. It wasn't an attack, it wasn't a demand, it was a warning. Earth wasn't preparing for small battles anymore. Earth was expecting a galactic war, and it was ready to survive it, alone if it had to. Meanwhile, the people of the galaxy, the civilians, the refugees, the colonists, watched the stars in silence. Many of them had once feared Earth, some still did. But more and more, they started to feel something else. Hope. Because when the raiders came, Earth stopped them. When the slavers attacked, Earth destroyed them. Earth didn't talk, it acted. And now, in this terrifying silence before the storm, many began to believe Earth wasn't just preparing for war, it was preparing to protect them all. Whether the council liked it or not, in the command core of Echo 13, the final message was, written into protocol, a single sentence to guide every fleet, every soldier, every drone when the war began. Do not ask who is right. It's only end what is wrong. And in that deep, terrible silence across space, one thing was now certain. Earth had not gone quiet. It was simply waiting to strike. The storm came faster than anyone expected. It began in the Halvian Belt, where 10 allied systems turned against their neighbors, unleashing fleets powered by stolen tech and rage. Then the Skarn remnants, once thought destroyed, reappeared, with a new alliance, launching coordinated strikes across 6 sectors. Pirate kings, mercenary swarms, even rogue AI networks emerged, all drawn by the same thing: chaos. The Galactic Council couldn't hold them back. Their peace treaties meant nothing now. Their warships were too slow, their commanders too afraid. Panic spread. Entire planets fell in ours. Refugees flooded into safe systems. Leaders begged for help. And in that moment, as fire consumed cities and screams filled the skies, a single transmission lit up the galaxy. No intro, no demands. Just one voice, calm and final. We are Deathworlders. We heard your screams, and we are coming. The response was not a fleet. It was a shadow across the stars. Thousands of black warships dropped out of hyperspace. In perfect silence, no banners, no flags. Just a sea of armor and fire. Earth didn't ask for alliances, but they didn't wait for permission. They hit the enemy like a hammer from the void. One system after another, Deathworlders struck without hesitation. Their drones swarmed pirate stations, cutting power and life support in seconds. Their soldiers moved through ruined cities like ghosts, eliminating threats with precision, sparing no one who raised a weapon. The rogues tried to hack Earth systems, only to be infected themselves by Echo 13, now evolved beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It controlled battlefields like a god of war, predicting attacks before they happened, shutting down enemy fleets mid-flight, reprogramming enemy drones to turn on their creators. The Skarn Alliance collapsed in 3 days. Across the stars, civilians watched in shock and awe. Earth ships didn't boast. They didn't fire warning shots. They ended the enemy and moved on. In the sky, the fleets looked like black wings, stretched over dying worlds, and below, every survivor knew one thing. The Deathworlders weren't just fighting. They were cleansing. This wasn't a war for resources. It wasn't for territory. It was something deeper, something personal. Earth had watched the galaxy burn before, and this time, it had decided never again. Inside the wrath of silence, Commander Celine Ward stood before a tactical map glowing red with enemy positions. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe deeply. She simply pointed, "Strike here. Burn the engines. Leave nothing behind." Her crew obeyed without a word. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were the storm itself. And as they moved through system after system, one message followed behind them, left in orbit for all to read. "You let the galaxy fall. We will raise it in fire." In the heart of the council, chaos turned to fear. Not of the enemy, but of Earth. "They're too fast," one ambassador shouted. "They don't ask. They just move. They're not just saving worlds. They're replacing governments," another screamed. And it was true. On more than 20 liberated planets, Earth left behind AI-controlled security grids, orbital shields, and resource units. Not to take over, but to ensure no one needed to ask for help again. It was peace through dominance, not empire protection by force. And to many across the stars, it was working. For the first time in 1,000 years, chaos was losing. On a battlefield above Kiral 9, a Deathworlder unit led by Dax advanced through heavy fire. His armor was cracked, his rifle nearly empty, but his eyes burned with clarity. "Browned." "Him," civilians cried in fear, watching the battle from ruined homes. Dax turned to them and said something no one expected. "You are safe now. We're Deathworlders. We don't run." And then he charged the enemy position, leading his team into the fire, because Deathworlders never waited. They ended what had to be ended, even if it cost them everything. In orbit, Echo 13 began uploading a final directive to every fleet. Initiate last sweep protocol. Identify all remaining threats. Cleanse. Confirm. Secure. There was no celebration. No announcement of victory. Only work. Earth didn't come to be thanked. It came because no one else would. And now, every world that once ignored Earth's cries watched Earth silence their own. Aboard the command station, General Amina Rain looked out at the stars. Her voice calm, but her hands were trembling slightly, a sign only she noticed. "They called us ghosts," she whispered. "Now they know the truth. We were never ghosts. We were the storm waiting to be unleashed." Her aide nodded. "They're afraid of us now." Amina turned to him and replied, "Good. That means they'll never forget again." And in the final moments of the war, across every system Earth had saved, a single broadcast was shared. It came from a child, the same girl who had once activated a distress beacon years ago. Now grown, now strong, her voice echoed across the galaxy. "We called for heroes, but Earth sent Deathworlders. And they never stopped fighting, not once, not for thanks, not for power, but because they remember what it feels like to be forgotten. And they promised no one else would be." Broadcast ended. The war was almost over, but Earth was just getting started. The war was over. Not because a treaty was signed, not because someone surrendered, but because there was simply no one left to fight Earth. The enemies had been burned from the stars. The pirates were gone, the Skarn wiped from the maps. Rogue fleets silenced. In every corner of space, The once chaotic systems were now quiet. It's the kind of silence that follows a thunderstorm. Survivors stood on broken worlds and looked up not at smoke, but at safety. They saw Earth's black ships pass over them, not with fire, but with power. Above Elos 9, where the first signal had once been sent, children pointed at the sky as drones dropped crates of food and medicine. There were no speeches, no flags, only protection. And it was clear to all now Earth hadn't come to rule. Earth had come to end what the Council could not. The Galactic Council still sat in its high towers. But its words were hollow, its rules ignored. It had lost control not because of Earth's power, but because of Earth's purpose. While others debated, Earth had acted. While others feared, Earth had moved. And now every system that Earth had touched was safe. For the first time in 1,000 years, there were no new slaver attacks. No silent wars. No planets left to die in the dark. That wasn't peace born of politics. It was peace built by war by people who had once been left behind and had sworn never again. On the bridge of the Wrath of Silence, Commander Celine Ward stood facing the stars. The final mission had been logged. Cthulhu's battle map was now still. No red zones. No alerts. Only calm blue lines across a galaxy once full of flames. But Celine didn't smile. She didn't rest. Like every Deathworlder, she knew this wasn't the end. Peace was only a moment between storms. And Earth would be ready for the next one. In the rebuilt halls of Tarsis 3, civilians gathered for something no one had expected. A day of thanks. It's not a celebration of Earth's power, but a simple act of memory. People placed lights in the sky. Lights shaped like ships. And they whispered the names of every world Earth had saved. One child asked her mother, "Why don't they come to the parties?" The mother smiled softly and said, "Because they're already gone, little one. They don't stay." She looked up at the night sky and whispered, "They're all ready, saving the next place." Earth itself, still quiet and cold, had become something more than a home. It was a myth, a warning, a promise. And deep under its frozen surface, the next generation of soldiers was already in training. Not just humans now, but allies. Survivors from saved worlds who had asked not to be protected but to join. To learn what it meant to be a Deathworlder. Earth had no empire, no colonies. But now it had something greater, a family of survivors. Together, they would watch the galaxy. Always ready. General Amina Rain gave her final order from the command vault. Let no voice go unheard. If anyone cries out, we listen. If anyone threatens the weak, we return. She looked at the commanders around her. But remember, we do not bring fear. We bring silence to fear. And with that, she stepped down. Her time was over. Era had begun. Across space, the name Deathworlder no longer meant monster. It meant shield. It meant fire against the dark. If the galaxy began to change not from law but from example. Fewer ships carried slaves. Pirates turned to farming. Old warlords disappeared, because they all knew now. You never knew when Earth might be listening. And on one quiet world, where no one expected to be remembered, a small family looked up and saw a light. It was just one drone, one crate, one survival kit. But they cried when they saw it, because it meant someone had heard. Them, and above that planet, the ship Exodus protocol hovered, its AI quietly logging one last note. Message received. Help given. Threat ended. Balance restored. It didn't say more, it didn't need to, because the Deathworlders were never meant to be kings. They were meant to be the last. One standing when everyone else had fallen. Now the galaxy had changed. Not because of Earth's power, because Earth had remembered what the others forgot. The weak don't need speeches. They need someone who never stops showing up. And so, they would again and again forever. Because this galaxy belongs to all. Of us now, and Earth. We'll always make sure it stays that way.